All right. Thank you everyone for joining. We have our right-click tools Lapse compliance dashboard today that we're showing. I'm Scott and I'll be giving a little introduction before we get started. For some of you who don't know as much about right-click tools, we kind of have three pillars that we focus on. The first would be improved productivity, which has a lot to do with shortcuts, configurations to save time. The second would be the actionable insights, which is what our Lapse dashboard falls under. That revolves around servicing data, working on compliance levels. And the final would be powerful automation, which focuses on automating tasks and creating single action tools. Here are a few of our customers. As you can see, we span through just about every industry. I'm sure if you look, you can see different companies in your industry. And today we will have our CTO, Chris Muster, go through our Lapse dashboard. And then towards the end, we'll have a live Q&A with our customer success manager, Marty Miller. So with that, I will hand it over to Chris and let him get started.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. So, for those of you who aren't aware, just give some background on Lapse. Lapse is the local administrator password solution. It's a free tool from Microsoft that lets you randomize the administrator account passwords across your organization. And this is useful for a couple of reasons, right? So number one, having a shared password that's local admin across your organization is a big risk, because if that password ever gets exposed, now we have to go on the password on all of the devices in our org. So we're not just, not only is the password exposed, but now we have to take action against every device in the org. Whereas if we had administrator permissions per user account, then maybe we're only concerned about the permissions or the resetting the password of the user that logged into some of these devices. The other concern when we have a shared local admin password is with auditing, right? So if I, as a service desk worker, gets a call from a user, and the user says, "Hey, I really need the software. I really need these permissions on this device," and I, as a service desk worker, log into the machine as that local admin account, there's no audit trail of who is actually making changes on that device. In a scenario where each service desk worker or each person with admin permissions logs into their own personal domain account that has elevated permissions, now we gain access to that audit trail and can see who's doing what in the environment. If you're looking to set up Lapse, it is a free tool for Microsoft, and we actually have a blog post on it that I'm showing on the screen now, written by Gary Block, and he goes over all of the components of getting Lapse set up in your environment, right? From downloading to creating the config manager application. There is a client-side component you do have to push out so that it can understand some of the group policies that get sent to it. And he talks about extending your AD schema, setting permissions inside of Active Directory. There are a number of things you have to set up. You're going to need help from your domain administrators to do it, but it's definitely worth doing to increase your security posture, or improve your security posture. And then once you have Lapse set up in your environment, you can we have a second dashboard that talks about how to configure right-click tools for Lapse. So definitely go check that out once you have it set up. All right, so moving on to the dashboard, Lapse is great for randomizing those local passwords, but it's not so easy to audit whether or not my devices are compliant with the Lapse policies that I'm trying to send out. And that's kind of the idea behind this Lapse dashboard, trying to make sure that the Lapse policies that we've set on our devices are actually being applied, and that the passwords that are randomized on the devices are being sent back up to Active Directory, right? Because it's not enough to just randomize the passwords. We actually want to be able to look those up in Active Directory when, should a machine lose its trust relationship to the domain and we need to rejoin it or something like that. So this Lapse dashboard, looks very similar to some of the other dashboards you've seen. We have at the top here, we have a domain field that you can edit. We do support multiple domains. So it's just a matter of changing this text box to the domain you want. By default, we choose the domain that the device that you're running this on is in. If you want, you can filter by OUs in that domain, or if you leave this blank, it'll just scan the entire domain for Lapse passwords. This left pie chart shows me the Lapse password state in Active Directory. And we really break it down into two different states: computers that have a Lapse password in Active Directory, and then computers that are missing that Lapse password in Active Directory. And as I click through here, you'll notice that the bottom table changes with the data of the devices that are in that state, right? So if I choose, computers with a Lapse password, and I, scroll to the right here, I can see, when that Lapse password is going to expire, as well as some other properties about the object in Active Directory for that device. So, for example, I could see that this device has a Lapse password that expired, almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, which might be of some concern. But, I can look over here and see, well, that device actually hasn't reset its password for quite a while. So it's likely that that device probably isn't in our Active Directory anymore, and maybe it's a candidate for cleaning up. Probably more important on this chart is to look at the devices without a Lapse password, because these are either devices that maybe I haven't deployed that Lapse client to. Maybe they're devices that I haven't correctly given permissions to change the Lapse password attributes in Active Directory. So when the client tries to send the password change information up, it doesn't write it back. Or it might be devices that have a misconfigured group policy, right? Maybe we're not targeting the Lapse group policy to these devices, and it's not resetting its password. So these are good candidates to go in and investigate further. And some of the actions that we provide that kind of help with that. I might be able to say I determine that a device is missing the Lapse client. Well, right from here, I can go in and launch the Remote Software Center. And when I do that, it's going to show me all of the software that I've deployed to the device. Now, assuming I've deployed that Lapse client, I can just go ahead and select it and prep it for install, right? Or if the Lapse password solution isn't showing in this list, maybe I need to add that device to a collection that has the deployed software to it, right? If we're using user-based deployments too, if it doesn't show up in the device list, I can also select my user account and install software that way as well. So a couple of different ways to get that Lapse client installed on the device, but we do require that you package it inside a config manager first. The right pie chart helps you dive a little bit further into troubleshooting some of these Lapse devices, right? So we have, kind of 4 states in this pie chart. We're only showing 3 of them right now, but devices with unknown state, we cannot determine, these are the devices where we couldn't determine whether or not a Lapse client is installed on these devices. This is all based on config manager's hardware inventory data. So, the unknown state might be devices that aren't reporting hardware inventory to config manager correctly. Maybe they're old devices, and our inventory cleanup task has cleaned up all of the inventory data inside of the config manager database. But they're worth investigating to see why they're showing up in this unknown list. Devices without Lapse client installed are those devices where we are getting inventory data from, but for whatever reason they don't have that Lapse client installed. And these are probably the devices you're going to want to run either that Remote Software Center tool to get that Lapse client installed, or the add to collection tool to get the collection or the device in the right collection to get that deployment. And then we also have computers with the 64-bit and 32-bit Lapse clients installed, sections of the pie chart as well. And these are particularly interesting for finding devices that should be working, right? They have that Lapse component installed, but maybe they don't have the password expiration set, or maybe the expiration itself is much older than it should be. These are good candidates to try and solve, solve why they're not setting their password. Either maybe there's a GPO not applied, or you need to talk to your AD team to help you get those those devices permissioned correctly so that they can write those attributes in AD. And speaking of that, if you do need help from your AD team, we do have this export to CSV button here, right? So if I see some devices that are maybe beyond the scope of my permission to get fixed, I can export this data, email it over to my AD team, and hopefully they can help me out there. The last bit I want to talk about with regards to this Lapse dashboard. Actually, before we go into that, we also have some other interesting Lapse actions here, right? So if for whatever, if I need to look up a Lapse password, maybe a user is locked out, maybe a machine lost its trust relationship, I can actually just right click on a device in anywhere inside the console and choose this AD Lapse password option. And it's going to pop up a small UI that shows me that password expiration date, as well as the password itself, right? So I can send that off to a user. I can send that off to a help desk worker who's at the device, ready to rejoin the machine to the domain. And since I've exposed this password, I can actually reset it if I want. So say I want to give the user 2 hours to do whatever work that they're doing. I can set that password to 2 hours from now. And when I hit set expiration, it's actually going to update the object in Active Directory to go ahead and set that new password expiration date. So 2 hours from now, once I hit this, it will reset its password. And if I want to force that change, I can right click on the device and choose update group policy to make sure that it's aware of those changes. The other interesting tool in this is the ability to reset passwords at scale, right? So say I'm concerned about a user that went through and maybe pulled a lot of passwords from Active Directory, and maybe they weren't supposed to do that, or maybe they weren't authorized to do that. We had a mistake in our security permissions. If I need to mass update my passwords, I can actually multi-select and choose set Lapse password expiration. And this will let me either expire it now. So it's going to set the password expiration to right now. And then I can choose to do a group policy update to kind of notify all of those devices that, hey, you need to go and update your policy right now and try to reset that password as fast as possible. So again, this is mostly useful for the moment where you realize that someone was looking at passwords they weren't supposed to, or maybe you're concerned that your permissions were too permissive in Active Directory, and maybe you were leaking more credentials than you wanted to. The last bit I want to cover is relating to Recast Management Server and how this Lapse dashboard gets even better when you start to incorporate Recast Management Server in it. I mentioned the multi-domain support thing up here. Out of the box in Recast Enterprise Standalone or in a default install of Recast Management Server, this is only going to work for trusted domains. But if you're a larger organization that's buying companies and maybe you haven't set up that one or two-way trust between the domains for those two orgs, you can actually spin up Recast Management Server and set up Recast proxies to go ahead and reach out to that untrusted domain on your behalf. And it's a way to make all of the right-click actions work across that untrusted domain boundary. And it works really well with this Lapse dashboard. The other bit I want to point out is that, again, going back to that Recast proxy thing, one of the challenges with auditing in Lapse is that we don't have an easy way to audit who's viewing those Lapse passwords in Active Directory. And one of the ways you can solve that problem is with Recast proxies. So if you wanted to enable auditing of Lapse password lookups, you could spin up a Recast proxy. You can see I have a couple here, but you can create a. Actually, jump over to another box. I created my example in the wrong box. You can create a Recast role. Here I've called it Lapse and give it permissions to only the couple of actions related to Lapse in the environment. And then if you go and set up a route inside of your Recast management server, as I've done here, it will actually run all of the actions through this RMS prod proxy service account. And what that enables you to do is to restrict all permissions to Lapse passwords in Active Directory and force anyone who wants to look up a Lapse password through the right-click tools to go through this Recast management server. And the main reason for doing that is for the audit logging capabilities of Recast management server, right? So here I can see when users are pulling Lapse data, right? So I can see that at this time, during this webinar, I pulled the Lapse password data for a device. And it's just a way to make sure that we're not leaking those passwords at scale because it'll show up in this audit log. The other nice thing is that these audit events are also written to the event log. So if you have some sort of third-party event logging capabilities, you can trigger events based on this audit data. So that concludes everything I wanted to say about the Lapse dashboard. I'm going to send it back over to Scott so that he can wrap up some of the other information about the webinar.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was excellent. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Yeah, so as Chris mentioned, this is our fourth of our five-part dashboard webinar series. Like the others, this one will be recorded, put on our YouTube channel, so feel free to check it out there whenever you want in case you missed anything. Our final part of the dashboard series is tomorrow. We'll be going over BitLocker compliance with one of our engineers, Mark Godfrey. He also led the hardware and firmware audit as long as the Active Directory cleanup dashboards. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and chat. I noticed we already have one. So with that, I'll hand the microphone over to Marty to answer your questions and the screen back to Chris. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Hey, everybody, I'm Marty. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Recast Software, and here to answer some questions. So you can go ahead and pop those into the Q&A and we will answer them to the best of our ability. It's possible to come up with things we don't understand yet, but we'll find out for you. Cool, so first question that we have, do you have any ideas on why my dashboards would just continuously load after I choose an OU and hit scan? I have a couple of ideas. The first thing that I'm going to say is I want to make sure that you're up onto our newest version of the right-click tools. This is actually going to be reading from Active Directory. And there was, we did have a couple of issues where certain Active Directory records would cause things not to read correctly, so it would stop reading. So that could be a possibility. The other thing, again, it's reading from Active Directory, so it's going to be permissions. You want to make sure that you have permissions, again, to read the things that you need to read in Active Directory as well. Just a couple of ideas there on those. Any questions like that? If I don't answer it completely, please feel free to open up a ticket and we will definitely take a look at it with you as well. Does this reporting tooling run into any issues if the local admin account is either disabled or renamed via GPO? If the local admin account is disabled or
I can take that
renamed. Sure, excellent, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, so Lapse itself actually supports working with renamed accounts via, if you rename them via GPO. And there's actually group policies available for you to set the different options there. I mentioned Gary's blog. He actually highlights a couple of the group policies in it. Right, so in here, I don't know how easy it is to see this, but we can, oops, scrolling the wrong direction here. I've lost it. There it is. In here, you can enable local password management, but you can also set the name of the account to manage, right? So if you've renamed that account, actually, if you've renamed the account but kept the same SID, Lapse will just handle that automatically. If you've disabled the local admin account and want to use a different local admin account to manage, because you didn't want things to spread via SID directly, you can also use this GPO setting to specify a manual name. As far as the dashboard itself, it doesn't actually care what's on the remote device. It actually only cares about what's in Active Directory. So as long as the device is able to set the two attributes that are on the device object in Active Directory, our Lapse dashboard should work in your environment. That's a great question.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Any other questions? We will answer those.
We did have a question about that Marty already answered, but it might be nice to do it live on air. About having machines with a trust issue, right? So a machine loses its trust relationship. Can I use this tool to recover the password on that? And the answer is yes, because those passwords are stored in Active Directory. The only time you wouldn't be able to recover a password in a trust loss scenario is if the machine lost trust because someone deleted the object itself. In that scenario, the object we're looking at no longer is there, so the password information is lost at that point. But it's a good reason to enable the Active Directory recycle bin, so you have an option to recover from that scenario.
We will wait. Oh, looks like we got another question. Good.
I didn't hear how fast the lockout is when pushed, but I assume instant if the machine is online. I'm guessing that what you're asking is about if we tell it to go ahead and change the password. When you go ahead and change the password, that will automatically, I think as Chris said, send the information into Active Directory and let it know that it needs to update the password. You're going to have to do a group policy update on the machine itself, which you can do through like right-click tools if you'd like, in order for that actual password to change. So it just kind of depends on how instant you mean by instant. It'll change the information in Active Directory, but actually there needs to be a group policy update before the computer will check back in and get that different password. All right. Is Recast server needed to delegate permissions on this dashboard to service desk staff? That is an excellent question. So in order to set permissions within Recast, yeah, you would want to set that up in the Recast management server. The one thing that is important to remember is that Recast isn't going to allow users to do something that they don't already have permissions to in Active Directory or in your environment. So if you're using a standalone version of the right-click tools and a user who doesn't have permission to read the Active Directory object for the Lapse password attempts to, it's not going to just automatically give it to them because they asked. So yes, you would want to do that to delegate permissions, but it's not going to trump necessarily permissions that they have already in your environment. My guess is that the password change works the same way while on VPN as long as you do the group policy update. I believe you're exactly correct. So as long as they are communicating with each other, and long as your computers can get group policy updates over your VPN, then absolutely this is going to work.
Yeah, and one interesting note on that, if you do have remote workers that are connected via the cloud management gateway, it might be worth downloading the April release, because we added CMG support to that. So you should be able to push that group policy over the fast channel in that scenario.
Excellent.
While we wait for these last few questions to come in, if you guys haven't had your free trial of 4.2 yet, you can get it on our website. In the upper right-hand corner of any page, you'll see a little blue button that says download right-click tools. Click that, and then you will fill out a form and you can get a free 30-day trial of our enterprise. If you guys want to stay up to date with everything we're doing, follow us on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube to get the little notifications, and keep an eye on our website and blog for all of our new updates.
While we're waiting, again, the other thing just to mention is we do also, if you can think of a super cool feature that you'd really love to see in right-click tools that we haven't implemented yet, absolutely go ahead and go to our feature requests page, which Chris is popping up right on the screen there as we're talking. But in this place, you can go ahead and vote on things that you think would make good right-click tools features, and you can additionally add features that you just thought of that you think would be great. So definitely something to take a look at, because we are excited about the future of right-click tools as well, and love it when we can get some good feedback from people. Is it necessary to uninstall the current version before installing the update? If you are talking about installing right-click tools, then generally, no, it is not required to uninstall the current version. You should be able to install right over the top of it.
All right, I believe that is it for questions. Right on time, 11:30. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Marty, for all the great information. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Great webinar, and we have our last one tomorrow, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.